On the first day, man was granted a soul, and with it, clarity. On the second day, upon earth was planted an irrevocable poison, a soul-devouring demon. The story of Demon Souls, much like many of the other FromSoftware titles, is very intricate and has a deep, rich history of lore that I find utterly fascinating. Games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne and Sekiro have captivated me in the past, but there's always been one game that would linger in my mind and intrigue me more than any other. This game is Demon Souls. With the release of the remake, I was finally able to experience this game's world, and I just got lost in the beautiful tragedy of it all. The game's creator, Hidetaka Miyazaki, has always been a mad genius when it comes to creating worlds of pure hopelessness, so I was looking forward to playing the game that started it all. I've conquered the lands of Lothric, I've rid the streets of Yharnam of vile beasts, I've reclaimed the land of Ashina, and linked the flame for the first time. But never have I played the first adventure that started everything. And so, today, I'm going to recount my experience of Demon Souls through a critique of how the game plays, the boss battles and environments, as well as the stories and lore of each of the individual Archstones, and some of their characters that caught my eye along the way. I want you guys to be able to somewhat feel the fascination I have with this game and its world, because genuinely, there are little games that capture what Demon Souls was able to capture. Right, with the introduction said and done, I see no better place to start than at the beginning. Before the creation of the soul, man was a mere husk, a biological creature that would act on impulse, completely unaware of the world around them, hell-bent on survival. This was until the first day, in which man was granted a soul. This soul brought clarity or humanity to these husks, allowing humans to become sentient people capable of thought and emotion. The divine creator that bestowed the soul upon man also created a soul-devouring demon, almost as if it didn't trust the humans with the souls that it had given them. This demon is known only as the Old One, the first and oldest demon with an insatiable hunger for souls and the power to create demons of its own. The Old One is said to be so alien and incomprehensible that the mere sight of it would cause lesser humans to lose their minds. We'll talk more about the Old One later, but all you need to understand about it now is that it is immensely powerful and exists solely to consume the souls of the living. Something that I found quite difficult to grasp was the world of Demon Souls itself and how the timeline fit together. You have to just sort of piece it together yourself through vague dialogue, environmental storytelling and item descriptions. As a result of the soul, and therefore the ability to think, humans grew from the husk they once were to mighty heroes, akin to mythological heroes from mythos in our world. People capable of felling dragons with their fists like Big M, or the storm rulers of the Shadowmen who harness the power of storms. There is also a boss called Old Hero, which may be a remnant of those mythical heroes from the early days of creation. The problem with all these heroes with obscene powers was that they were abusing the gift of the soul by studying and creating magic to bolster their own power. The soul was given to man so that they could think and feel, not so that it could be exploited for magic. This magic is known as the soul arts, as it comes from using the soul as the power source to focus the power of magic. This magic is known as soul power and imbues one with the power of the self. This led to the founding of two separate sources of magic under the umbrella of soul arts: sorcery and miracles. Miracles are powers that are born of the belief in the gods, which makes sense as they require the faith stat in game to use, meaning the stronger your faith in the gods, the more powerful your miracles become. Sorceries, on the other hand, are referred to by many as unholy, as they do not require a belief or devoutness for the gods to cast. Sorceries require the intelligence stat to use, opposed to faith, implying that power must be used in honor of the gods. However, all magic, be it holy or unholy, is derived from the Old One, because its presence is the very source of all magic in the Demon Souls universe. There really is no good or bad magic, just the soul arts. As the knowledge of these soul arts were passed down from generation to generation, and the cultures succeeding the heroes we mentioned before continued in pursuit of the soul arts, each of these cultures incorporated magic into their respective religions, though none of them worshipped the divine creator that gave man a soul in the first place, which must be why the Old One was created, so that mankind would be taught a lesson for their arrogance. The guiltiest of all in their pursuit of power were the Monumentals. The Monumentals were a magic-based society that were the biggest power of the world at the time, who had endlessly exploited the power of the Old One for their own gain for generations. Their mastery of the soul arts allowed them to control the world. This blind pursuit of power led the Monumentals to discover, worship, and then eventually wake the Old One from its eternal sleep, due to their greed and lust for more power. This greed led to the first Scourge. The Monumentals' misuse of the soul arts led to a catastrophic event that left the fabric of reality fractured. A deep, colourless fog depicted in the game's introductory cutscene swept over the lands, consuming civilizations and nearly the entire world. From the fog came demons with powerful souls capable of incomprehensible feats. The Monumentals successfully fought off the demons, pushing back the fog and lulling the Old One back to slumber. Although by the time they had done this, most of the world was already consumed, erased by the fog, and innumerable souls had been lost. In order to connect what little of the world remained, continuing the use of the power of the soul arts, the Monumentals created 6 stones which were able to link people and places, meaning that these Archstones, as the Monumentals took to calling them, could be used for teleportation. These precious Archstones were entrusted to 6 elders of 6 kingdoms. One to the humble king of the northern kingdoms of Boletaria, one to the king of Stonefang, a civilization of miners famed for their tunnels, one to the wise queen of Latria of the Great Ivory Tower, one to the shaman of the Shadowmen who worshipped storms and mourned the dead on their island shrine, one to the chieftain of the humid valley of Defilement, and the last to the great giants of the northern limit. These Archstones were placed at nodes across what remained of the earth. The Old One was contained inside the Nexus, and the soul arts were banned. The Monumentals became half-living sentinels of the fabric of reality, mending the world as best they can. The first Scourge had led to an immeasurable amount of souls being lost, so it was their duty to make sure that the Old One stayed bound to the Nexus, never to wake from its slumber again. But as time progressed, the years passed and the memory of the Monumentals faded, and so too did the dangers that the use of the soul arts possessed. The kingdom of Boletaria found itself in an era of prosperity, with the beloved King Allant leading his people through this era, expanding the great walls of Boletaria and defeating the remaining demons left behind from the first Scourge. All seemed to be going well for King Allant. His people loved him, his kingdom was thriving, and he was a powerful ruler. However, he had grown old and melancholy, no longer resembling the man from his earlier years. Alas, he was just a man, and like many others before him, his achievements were not enough. He wanted more power. This led him to study the power of the soul arts, researching the power of the long-forgotten Monumentals, going mad searching for more and more power and becoming the most powerful ruler that the world had ever seen. In fact, Allant became so greedy that finally, after years of prosperity, he awoke the Old One, as he believed that the only way to end the suffering of the world was to end the world altogether. Upon the Old One's awakening, Allant made a pact with the Old One, granting him immeasurable power in exchange for souls. Allant had become a demon in his own right, as the term demon in Demon Souls is usually reserved for very powerful beings, so even humans can become demons. With his newfound power, King Allant led legions of demons upon Boletaria, so that humanity would end, along with their suffering. Allant went so far as to create a demonic image of himself that represented himself in his glory days when he was a younger man, as the immense transfer of power that the Old One had bestowed upon him had mutated him into a bloated abomination of flesh, unable to even stand. Allant retreated deep within the Old One and planned on waiting for the end of reality. This is where you come in. A wandering soul that finds its way through the fissure and into the Nexus. A soul tasked with slaying the archdemons and consuming their soul and becoming a demon yourself, all to lull the Old One back to sleep once more. And so begins the story of Demon Souls. Your journey begins and ends within the Nexus. But what is the Nexus? Obviously, from a video game standpoint, it serves as a hub that should be taken advantage of between each boss. After killing a boss, returning to the Nexus is paramount as it allows you to deposit any unwanted items that burden you into Stockpile Thomas's storage, but more importantly, it allows you to imbue yourself with the power of souls to bolster your own strength through the magic of the Maiden in Black, a character we will return to later on. You can also upgrade weapons and shields using the various upgrade materials you find in the open world, as Blacksmith Baldwin offers his services to any brave heroes that pass through the Nexus in search of demons. The Nexus is your home. It's where all of the Archstones converge, and also where you return to when you die in your corporeal and spirit form, as your soul is linked to the Nexus because of your duty to lull the old one back to its slumber. All would-be demon slayers return to the Nexus upon death and can only visit the worlds that the Archstones allow them to. They cannot fully die, and they cannot leave until their duty is fulfilled. After defeating the demons, creating the Archstones, and lulling the old one back to sleep, the Monumentals sealed the old one within the Nexus. The Monumentals sacrificed their humanity to dedicate their existence to safeguarding the Nexus so that no one may ever rouse the old one again. And as we know, however, this did not last. The Nexus is host to an array of NPCs that can help you on your journey. First, we have Stockpile Thomas, a humble man who was caught in the middle of the demon Scourge, losing his wife and young daughter in the process. Blaming himself for his lack of an ability to protect his family, he does what he can in the Nexus by lightening the burden of the demon slayer and keeping his or her belongings safe in between trips to the Nexus. The story of Stockpile Thomas is incredibly bleak, especially given his honest and trustworthy demeanour. It is evident that he's a good man. In the Boletarian Palace you can find two hung corpses, one holding a jade hair ornament and the other a set of raggedy robes. Upon returning these items to Thomas, it becomes clear that these were the corpses of his wife and daughter. He even rewards you with a ring in return for the closure you were able to bring him. Even after finding out the true fate and torture that befell his wife and child, he still remains a helpful man determined to turn the tides of the Scourge of Demons in any way he can. We love you, Stockpile Thomas. Another important NPC on your journey is Blacksmith Baldwin, a hardy man who has seen his fair share of adventure in his younger days. As I mentioned earlier, he serves as the Demon Slayer's blacksmith, offering weapon upgrades and repairs. He was once a blacksmith and miner who worked within the Stonefang tunnels, searching for rare and powerful ores, although it seems that the second Demon Scourge has forced him from his home and into the Nexus, where he offers his services to passing demon slayers. His twin brother, Ed, can be found in the Stonefang tunnels, and he can turn powerful demon souls into mighty weapons forged with the power of the soul. Blacksmith Baldwin becomes outmatched after you unlock access to Ed, however he's still a nice addition to the roster of humans that remain within the Nexus and has some great dialogue. Lastly, the major NPC within the Nexus is the Maiden in Black. Not much is known about the backstory of the Maiden in Black, other than that she was once one of the most powerful demons in existence due to her ability to harness and manipulate the power of souls. This is how she increases the power of the Demon Slayer over the course of the game. The Maiden in Black maintains direct communion with the Old One, and is even able to lull it back to sleep once the archdemons have been slain, which means she could be even more powerful than the Old One itself. Regardless of her past misdeeds as a demon, she is now in agreement with the remaining Monumental that the Old One must be lulled back to sleep, so that the world may begin to heal again. She too is bound to the Nexus, just like us, just like the Monumental, and just like the Old One. There are other NPCs that appear and disappear from the Nexus as the game goes on, depending on certain actions and interactions you have whilst playing the game. Some of the most notable characters are Bjor of the Twin Fangs, Disciple of God and Saint Urbane, Ostrava of Boletaria, Patches the Hyena, Sage Frake the Visionary, and Yurt the Silent Chief. Although we won't get into the stories of these characters just yet, they'll be explained later on in the video as we explore their lands of origin. There are also additional NPCs that I would like to cover too, as they have quite interesting stories. After becoming acquainted with your allies in the Nexus and with the world being open to you, the journey of building your power begins, at no other place than the gates of Boletaria. The first fractured world in Demon's Souls is the Kingdom of Boletaria. You begin your journey outside of the Citadel with the high walls of the Gates of Boletaria reaching into the sky, dwarfing your player character in comparison. Boletaria is a beautiful northern kingdom with a beautiful display of fantasy architecture to soak in. It really does give off this vibe of a once great kingdom brought to its knees by the demon Scourge. There's so much hidden within Boletaria too, and we'll get to that in due time. Upon arriving in Boletaria, this is your first true chance to experience the game and the way it plays, because let's be honest, the introductory section with the Vanguard demons are walk in the park if you know a little bit about bosses in video games. The first enemies you're met with are dreglings, small diminutive people who have lost their souls as a result of the Scourge. These people attack you because the only awareness they have left is how to tell who has souls and who doesn't. You happen to have souls, so they attack you in the hopes that they may be able to restore their own soul by taking yours from you. Honestly, the tight streets of Boletaria are daunting at first, so you don't know where enemies could come from. Unlike many of the other Soulsborne games, Demon Souls has a very heavy emphasis on shields. Shields are invaluable in this game. Being able to deflect physical and magical damage when the need arises is so important, I cannot stress it enough. With the very narrow places that the game expects you to fight in, having a shield is always a good call. In Demon Souls, a good defense is usually the best offense, because if you look after yourself, there will always be time to fend off your enemies once you're in a good position to do so. Getting greedy, hitting enemies, and being overly aggressive only leads to a humbling lesson. That is, you are always in danger no matter if you're level 1 or level 100. This lesson is earned quite early on, which is good because it prepares you for the rest of the game. Boletaria also teaches the player a great lesson in terms of how exploration works in this game. If you've played the other Soulsborne games, and this will be second nature to you, but most players won't think to explore the area, going off the beaten track to find additional items that will greatly help you on your journey. For example, in Boletaria 1.1, you can find a pair of dragons sitting on some rocks overlooking the palace. You can actually kill the red dragon, which means all you need to do is sneak up behind the blue dragon and steal the items from under its tail. Going through the effort to do this is actually rewarding, because it gives you items and gear that can help you going into the next area. Another example is in Boletaria 1.1. If you make your way up to the top of the wall through all the soldiers and dreglings, you can open a gate which opens up access to the Cling Ring, an invaluable ring that means you will have more health in soul form, and you're going to be spending a lot of time in soul form. This gate also acts as a shortcut, so you no longer have to make your way through the dark scaffolding on the inside of the wall. You just have to kill some minor enemies and walk up some stairs, which is much easier on you as there's less surprises. After fighting your way through the first lot of enemies and probably dying a fair few times, you can jump over a banister which will introduce us to our first character, Ostrava of Boletaria. Ostrava finds himself in a dire situation, with dreglings surrounding him and no escape plan. Upon dropping down and talking to him, he asks us for help.
That was a bold jump. A surprise indeed. Well, now that you are here, pray thee, fend off these dreglings.
After slashing through the dreglings surrounding Ostrava, he too jumps down and thanks the Demon Slayer for saving him.
My thanks for your brave rescue. I am Ostrava of Boletaria. Accept this as a token of my gratitude. Now I must go. There is something for me to take care of.
Then he goes on his way. At first, Ostrava seems like a standard knight that has ventured into Boletaria seeking demon souls. However, he has a much more intriguing backstory. The name Ostrava is actually an alias. His true name is Ariona Allant, the son of King Allant, who brought the demon Scourge upon the world. He previously lived with his uncle, Lord Rydell, in the southern kingdom of Latria. However, as a result of the Scourge of demons plaguing the world, he saw fit to don some fluted knight armor and the sword and shield of an old Latrian hero, and returned to Boletaria in order to dispel the rumours that his father had become a demon, because, after all, the beloved King Allant couldn't possibly be a demon, could he? Upon arrival in Boletaria, it becomes clear that he is out of his depth, as the Demon Slayer has to save him multiple times in his story. The second time we meet Ostrava is on the Lord's Path in Boletaria 1.2. He's gotten himself stuck behind a portcullis and is once again pinned in by enemies, who he does not have the ability to fend back. After saving him, he will always return to the Nexus once you warp out of Boletaria. Upon speaking to him in the Nexus, he talks about Boletaria before the Blight and how greatly the king ruled over the land, as well as the legendary old hero King Doran, who founded the kingdom and protects the two mythic swords, Demon Brant and Soul Brant, one that banishes that which befouls man and one that banishes man himself. More importantly though, he speaks of the old heroes of Boletaria, the noble twin fangs Valafax and Bjor, Alfred the Tower Knight, Metis the Penetrator, and the brave tribesman Longboat Ulan. Those last three are quite significant because if you're perceptive, you'll realise that these knights of old are the three bosses of Boletaria. Tower Knight is Alfred, as his name suggests, Metas is the Penetrator, and lastly, Longboat Ulan is the Phalanx. These legendary knights from the prime of Boletaria have been corrupted by the demons, and now instead of fighting against them, they serve the Old One in devouring the souls of the living. The proof for this can be found in Boletaria 1-4, the King's Tower. There are 3 black phantoms waiting for the player, guarding the king. These 3 phantoms resemble the 3 bosses before they were corrupted by the demons, and they drop weapons that further back this theory. The first black phantom drops the Penetrator's sword, and the second drops the Tower Knight's shield. The third drops a tribal bow. These 3 items are the signatures of the 3 knights that served King Allant during his reign: Alfred the Tower Knight, Metas the Penetrator, and Longbow Ulan the tribesman. This story is so tragic. These once great heroes had been reduced to nothing more than husks to be manipulated by the demons. In defeating them, you are laying their souls to rest. But we'll talk more about the bosses in a while. Back to the story of Ostrava. After saving him a third and final time in the inner ward of Boletaria's citadel, you can find him in the King's Tower, sitting on the steps that lead to his father's throne room. Ostrava fought through the soul-starved and even evaded a dragon, but his journey comes to an end at these steps. He finds that the rumours about his father are true. Allant has succumbed to his lust for power, and nothing remains of him besides a demon in his image. Ostrava finds himself heartbroken at his father's decision to betray the people of Boletaria, and entrusts you with the mausoleum key so that you can retrieve Demon Brandt and bring an end to his father's life. Ostrava then dies from the wounds inflicted by his father, unable to bear the reality that Allant had left him with. You can find what's left of his soul in Black Phantom form once you walk up the stairs leading to the King's Chamber. Killing the Phantom will finally lay Ostrava to rest. The story of Ostrava of Boletaria is really sad in my opinion. He's a likeable character and has a lot to say regarding the world of demon souls. When you meet him, he's very optimistic about his journey, but every time you meet him after that, he seems to be aware that he's out of his depth, and that the stories of his father may be true, until he's left at the end, demoralized, defeated, and dying on the steps to his father's throne room. The first major boss of Demon Souls is the Phalanx Demon, the form of the corrupted soul of Longbow Ulan. The boss is a congealed mess of purple goo that seems to have engulfed a large tree-like core which contains a glowing aura. This core is defended by hoplites that shield the core from the Demon Slayer's attacks. This boss is a complete pushover. Once the hoplites are dealt with, there's nothing the Phalanx itself can do to damage you, and the hoplites are easy enough on their own. I believe this boss was intended to be the starter boss before you start getting into the more difficult fights. A boss that gets you feeling confident before you face the others that destroy you if you're not paying attention. On the whole, I'm actually not a big fan of the Phalanx. The lore behind this boss is really interesting, with the noble Longbow Ulan being turned into the gluttonous demon. They could have had a really cool tribal bowman designed boss fight that actually offers some challenge, opposed to a congealed blob of jelly that slides slowly away from you as you hack it to pieces. Although, as I said, I do believe this boss to be placed as to not challenge the player too much in the first area. Upon defeating the boss, you absorb its soul, which increases your own power. It also restores your corporeal form, if you were in soul form. Now, what is soul form and human form, and what do they do? This was a part of the game that took me a long time to grasp, so I'd like to get this straight as soon as possible. Assuming you're in human form, if you die, then you come back in soul form with half of your health bar. Dying in human form does have consequences on the way the game plays. If you die in human form, it shifts the tendency of the world downwards towards black world tendency, which means enemies become stronger and you do less damage. However, killing bosses and black phantoms increases your world tendency towards white, which means you do more damage and enemies are weaker. So what's the point of soul form? Well, playing the game in soul form means when you die, your world tendency will not change to black because you are not in human form. This system is very complicated, and I can see exactly why it was never used in a Souls game again, because it can be very hard to manipulate. There are stages to world tendency too. There isn't just pure black or pure white, there are steps towards each extremity, which can make it quite a task if you want to get from pure black to pure white or vice versa. So why is world tendency useful? There are certain optional key events that happen at pure black world tendency and pure white world tendency, and if you want to experience each of these events for the platinum, or for a specific item, then you must manipulate the world tendency of that Archstone accordingly. The only way to reduce world tendency towards black is to die in human form repeatedly, and the only ways to increase world tendency towards white are to kill bosses, black phantoms, or primeval demons. Primeval demons are enemies that can can be found in each world, a pure black world tendency, and they do not fight back as they are essentially newborn demons, only able to exist in a world that favours them. World tendency is quite a confusing mechanic. I think most people will ignore it on a first time playthrough as I did, but once you want to start hunting trophies or getting specific rare items or weapons, you have to play by the game's rules and shift the world tendency according to what you want. And if you want to change your worlds to pure black tendency, just make sure you have a lot of stones of ephemeral eyes so that you can turn into human form whenever you need. I think Bluepoint should have added more ways to change world tendency, but I do understand that they wanted the game to be as true to the original as possible. And as annoying as world tendency is, I am glad that I got to experience it the way it works in the original game opposed to a more simplified version. After fighting through legions of soul-starved, soldiers that have been enslaved by demons, and even coming toe-to-toe with the dragon, the Demon Slayer comes across another of the mighty heroes of Boletaria. This time it's the demonic image of Alfred the Tower Knight, a huge knight true to his name, towering over the player character, brandishing his famed spear and shield. Thankfully, this boss is not a pushover in the slightest. In fact, I'd say that the Tower Knight is one of the more difficult bosses in the game, as some of his attacks can be quite difficult to manage. He slams his shield down in a multitude of different ways, which can catch you off guard if you're not paying attention. Some of these attacks can one-shot you if it's a direct hit. The Tower Knight also thrusts and swipes his colossal spear, which can be quite difficult to dodge if you don't time it perfectly. Lastly, if you're at a distance, the Tower Knight throws spears of pure magical energy at you, which do massive amounts of damage and can even damage you through walls if you're not careful. The key to this boss is to enchant your weapon with magic and slash away at his feet until he falls over. This gives you an opportunity to run straight to his head whilst he's down to do extra damage. If you are a magic build and your sword is enchanted, hitting his head does huge damage, so that's something to keep in mind. The next area of Boletaria is the Inner Ward, where the streets intertwine and the reviled fat officials that govern the remaining people of Boletaria reside, drunk off their power. This area introduces us to our second NPC of this region, Bjor, the Twin Fangs. Remember the mighty heroes I mentioned earlier? Well, Bjor is one of them, and only he has remained sane and hasn't succumbed to the Scourge of Demons. After killing one of the fat officials towards the end of the area, he drops a key. If you backtrack to the Lord's Path, you can use this key to open a door that leads to a set of cages, defended by another fat official. Upon killing him, you can use the key to open the cells inside, one of which waits Bjor, a mighty warrior from times past.
I'm called Bjor, the elder of the Twin Fangs of Boletaria. I thank you. You deserve a handsome reward. Only I have none. I'm going to sleep. Go on ahead.
He and another great hero called Valifax formed the Twin Fangs, the duo of King Allant's best warriors. His brushwood armor set is nearly impenetrable, and it takes great strength to wear. Much like Ostrava, Bjor finds himself unable to believe that King Allant has betrayed his people, and swears loyalty to the king despite everything that has happened. However, with a false king on the throne of Boletaria, Bjor found himself imprisoned, awaiting his fate in the hands of the fat officials. His goal is similar to yours, to defeat the remaining demons so that the world stands a chance of returning to normal. Again, Bjor's story is quite a sad one, despite his hearty demeanour and habit of falling asleep in the least practical of places. His goal is to search for those who were once his brothers and killed them, so as to push back the Scourge of Demons. Luckily for him, we defeated Longbow Ulan, the Phalanx, and Alfred the Tower Knight, which means all that remains is the corrupted form of Metas, the Penetrator Knight. The Penetrator Knight is actually one of my favourite fights in the entire game. The design of the Penetrator's armour has that typical FromSoftware gothic fantasy look, with his cursed blade contrasting his dark steel armour. Not to mention the introduction to this fight has him emerging from the fog after impaling a fat official through his chest and throwing him across the boss arena. If you've saved Bjor prior to this fight, he joins you to lay the last of his fellow knights' souls to rest.
Do you need some help? By the honour of the good knights, this demonic folly shall be stopped once and for all.
Bjor is a godsend during this fight, although I think he can make it too easy. Bjor's greatsword does a lot of damage, and he can tank a lot of damage himself, which means that for most of the fight you can use Bjor as bait and let the Penetrator focus on him while you attack the boss from behind. If you get the chance, I'd recommend trying the boss out first without saving Bjor, because it's a great boss in its own right. Without Bjor, it is quite challenging. The Penetrator Knight relentlessly attacks the player, flourishing and thrusting his cursed blade through the air. The sword itself has an incredibly long reach, meaning dodging can be difficult if you aren't paying attention to which side he's swiping from. He also uses a thrust attack in which he impales you through your chest and throws you across the room, just like he did with the Fat Official in his introductory cutscene. I personally loved the Penetrator fight. It really was such a well-designed boss, from the way he looks to the actual fight itself. It's a real challenge and probably one of the best bosses in Demon's Souls without a doubt, as well as being one of the most iconic Soulsborne bosses in the entire franchise. After defeating the 3 demons in Boletaria, only King Allant remains, although he will have to wait as there are other demons to face in the other worlds before we take on Allant himself. The goal of the Demon Slayer is to hunt demons in return for power that will allow us to defeat Allant, so that the Maiden in Black can lull the Old One back to sleep. So we're not ready to fight the False King just yet. Although this doesn't mean we're done in Boletaria. One last character remains to be saved. The Fat Official that was guarding Bjor's cell drops another key that allows you to open a hidden gate in the inner ward area. The gate is hidden behind some boxes and through a small system of alleyways which leads to a tower. Within the tower you will find a Fat Official, although the stairs to get to him are unreachable. To unlock this area you will have to collect the official set by going to the various worlds and killing Fat Officials. There are guaranteed drops for the official's cap, gloves, clothes and trousers, so they aren't too hard to come by. Wearing this armour tricks the Fat Official into lowering the gate, which means you can kill him, allowing you to talk to his prisoner, Yuria the Witch.
Heavens, you came to save me. Thank you. No, I'm fine. With a little rest, I can soon walk. You go on ahead. I do not wish to be a dead weight.
Yuria teaches you advanced soul arts if you give her boss souls, and she returns to the Nexus upon saving her. She was imprisoned by Executioner Meralda, a black phantom you can find in pure black world tendency, during the siege of Boletaria for her use of magic. It is implied that witches were rounded up and executed by officials, just like Stockpile Thomas's wife that can be found all the way back at the gates of Boletaria. There isn't much to know about Yuria the Witch's past life before she entered the fissure into Boletaria, although she is terrified of teaching you soul arts, which may be because the use of soul arts brought about the demon Scourge in the first place. She talks about her witchcraft in a very negative light, without knowing that her use of witchcraft is as dangerous as the saints' use of miracles. However, the church deemed sorcery and witchcraft to be evil, despite all magic being a form of soul arts, a power coming directly from the Old One. Although she does give some insight into how her witchcraft differs from sorcery. Sorcery stems from an understanding of the essence of demon souls, whereas witchcraft is merely a way to channel the soul's energy. If a demon is cursed, so too shall be the witchcraft that stems from its soul. Yuria the Witch is an invaluable vendor if you have a magic build, as she sells the top level spells, although be aware she does ask for rare boss souls in return for this knowledge, so make sure you're 100% sure what spell you want before buying it. So, the demons of the first Archstone have been vanquished, the mysteries of Boletaria have been uncovered, and all the characters' stories have been seen through to the end, be it a tragic end or one of newfound camaraderie. So, where does our journey lead next? Well, to the second Archstone of the mighty city of Stonefang. The second remaining world in Demon's Souls is the great city of Stonefang, a city of miners who maintain Stonefang Tunnel. As a result of the Scourge of Demons, the miners are dispossessed of their souls, and with no thoughts of their own, they work tirelessly in silence, without purpose. You begin your journey into this ancient mining ground atop a range of dusty orange mountains, with the arid landscape stretching as far as the eye can see. Definitely a stark contrast to the grey hues and stalwart fortresses of Boletaria. Stonefang is a mysterious place with a wealth of history and minerals. It's safe to say that Stonefang is filled with character and intrigue, which is a testament to Miyazaki's ability to build worlds through environmental and subtle storytelling. From a gameplay standpoint, Stonefang is largely unremarkable. The bosses are brilliant in all fairness, well, apart from one of them, but we will talk about those later on. The actual levels are quite small and only really serve as places that you'll come back to when you need to farm upgrade materials, which I guess is fitting because it is a mine after all. You'll mostly be fighting the soul-starved workers and fat officials during your time in Stonefang tunnels. They're quite slow enemies, which means you can run straight past them if you aren't bothered about collecting the extra souls. In fact, all of the enemies here are slow, but they hit hard, so be sure to keep that in mind. To be more precise, you don't actually explore the city of Stonefang in the game, but instead the Stonefang Tunnel, which is a massive complex of underground tunnels dug by the inhabitants of the nearby Stonefang city. The city has large stone walls, stone buildings and bridges connecting the larger metropolis to smaller villages. The tunnel is central to the economy of Stonefang and therefore holds great importance within the culture of this area within the fractured world. The people of Stonefang have cultivated their expertise in mining since the dawn of their civilization, and therefore the Stonefang Tunnel is a generations worth of mining and excavating. Your goal is to fight deeper and deeper into the tunnels to find the archdemon that rests within the heart of the mountains. Of course, you aren't completely alone in Stonefang. There's some quite important characters you'll find along the way. The first is Blacksmith Ed, a skilled blacksmith obsessed with his work. We talked about him earlier, although there's more to his character. The blacksmiths Ed and Baldwin are twin brothers, and there's one thing for certain: they both share a sharp tongue and insurmountable physical strength. Baldwin talks about his time in Stonefang and how he used to be a lot stronger in his younger years. However, he claims that Ed surpassed him in both strength and temper, and he still does. Blacksmith Ed is a solitary man who lives to do nothing but smith the finest weapons. He is annoyed by any distraction you offer him unless it's to further his work, which is why you entrust him with the Searing Demon Soul, a soul of immeasurable heat capable of forging other demon souls into legendary weapons that can be used by the Slayer of Demons. Blacksmith Ed is an invaluable vendor in this game, and it's highly recommended to always give him the Searing Demon Soul on every playthrough of the game, because there isn't really anything else you can do with it besides consuming it for souls. Blacksmith Ed will remain in Stonefang to continue his work. He does not appear in the Nexus like most major NPCs, but instead continues his solitary life in the home of his birth. Making your way through the smithing grounds of Stonefang is no easy task, but once you've defeated the fat officials and the mindless workers of the mines, a more dangerous threat awaits you deep within the mines, a predator that has already made countless victims. The Armor Spider. Prior to becoming a powerful demon, the Armor Spider was most likely a mundane subterranean species of arachnid that was transformed into a demon and granted power as a result of this. The Great Spider has a hard shell and long jointed limbs that encompass the boss arena, and it can even use a primitive form of flame magic which proves to be quite troublesome upon a direct hit. The boss itself is a joy to play in my opinion. With a variety of telegraphed attacks and a clear attack pattern, this boss is incredibly fun if you can get past its grotesque visage. This is also one of my favourite bosses in the game for its simplicity, because it isn't an easy fight on your first time, but it's manageable and pushes you to your limits at this point in the game. After defeating the armoured spider, you push deeper into the mines and closer to the vast lakes of lava that the Stonefang tunnels are famed for. The Tunnel City is a system of pathways that gave the city its name. Legend has it that deep inside, beyond the swamps of molten lava, is an ancient dragon burial ground. This area is quite small and is only host to a few enemies, which are easily avoidable. The scorching bear bugs make their home along the banks of these vast lakes of lava, and the miners remain occupied in their endless cycle of working. However, one important creature we meet along the way is to be feared more than anything you find in the mines. That is Patches the Hyena. If you're familiar with other FromSoftware titles, you may recognize Patches as trustworthy Patches from Dark Souls, Patches the Spider from Bloodborne, or Unbreakable Patches from Dark Souls 3. Yes, he's a fan favourite character, and his inclusion in the Soulsborne series began here, in Demon Souls. You meet him next to one of the vast lakes of lava in the Tunnel City, in which he entices the player with the prospect of treasure that should have been his, but he will let you have as a token of pure goodwill.
I have an idea. That treasure over there should be mine, but I'll let you have it. I promise. No tricks. I won't move a muscle until the treasure's safely in your hands. You can trust me, can't you?
Although it's very clear this is a trap, as there is a large bear bug stuck just above the passage, which subsequently falls down and kills you if you don't deal with it first before grabbing the treasure. Killing the bear bug will release an explosive blast that knocks Patches to the ground, the comeuppance he deserved for trying to trick you to your death. After this encounter, Patches will make his way to the Nexus, in which he becomes a very valuable vendor, selling fresh spice as well as some of the high tier moon grasses. It's definitely worth keeping Patches around instead of just killing him for trying to trick you. Although he will eventually leave the Nexus Nexus and appear in another part of the fractured world. However, we'll talk more about Patches and his get-rich-quick schemes later. Fighting through the remaining tunnels of the Tunnel City, you can see just how much digging this civilization of miners has done, pillaging the earth for its resources. But what motivates the miners of Stonefang to strip the depths of the earth? The Digger King on the Archstone is depicted to be wearing a bejeweled crown, so it's safe to say that the royals of this civilization wanted for nothing. There is also no evidence at all of a military of any sort. The people of Stonefang were praised for their work and riches alone, so rather than for their own luxury, the people of Stonefang most likely extracted these rare metals and ores so that they could fashion them into goods to be sold to the highest bidder. Thanks to the iron from Stonefang, the equipment used by Boletarian knights is more robust and therefore more effective, meaning the work of the miners of Stonefang would have been in high demand from all over the world. This would have been made all the more profitable thanks to the discovery of rare and powerful ores. At the very bottom of the Stonefang mines, at the core of the earth, lies a dragon graveyard revealing the bones of countless huge dragons that fell at the hands of the ancient hero, Big M. The item description for the Hands of God indicate that there was once a man of immeasurable strength who was able to kill dragons with his bare hand. The Japanese item description also makes mention of this, but goes into further detail of how Big M would crush the dragon's hard scale hides, punching the massive beasts into submission, and then afterwards enslaving them and continuing the fight for the sheer sport of it. As a result of these feats, Big M became the god of honourable men, if you follow the notion that real men settle matters with just their fists. However, all that remains of the legendary Big M are his legend and the bones of the many dragons he once felled. Waiting for us, past the bones of the dragons, is the second boss of Stonefang, the Flame Lurker. On the surface, this boss looks to be just your standard fire demon, however, there is much more to this boss that meets the eye. It just takes a little digging. The dragon skeletons were uncovered by the ancestral diggers. These ancient people of Stonefang took considerable interest in the larger bones of the lot. Based on their extraordinary size, these bones once belonged to a dragon of limitless power, a dragon god. The very soul of this dragon god itself is immensely powerful, as you can use it to buy the Firestorm spell, the most powerful offensive spell in the game. Similarly, the miracle you can get from the soul is called God's Wrath, also a very powerful source of magic. The dragon god was a force of nature, inspiring fear in those who discovered its bones. The subsequent worship of these bones and their burial ground was in fact an act of fear, not of appreciation. They feared so much the wrath of the corpse that they had unearthed that the ancient people of Stonefang carved a temple out of the rock to enshrine the dragon god's bones within the earth, in the hopes that this would appease and confine it. The chamber where this dragon god resides is a gigantic hollow space within the heart of the mountain that was created with the sole purpose of encasing the bones within molten lava. The temple doubles as both a shrine to the god and as a way to redirect the lava to rebury the remains of the god so as to suppress it. However, this isn't all the ancient tribes of Stonefang did to confine the god to its grave. Ages ago, a fire demon was imprisoned in an underground temple littered with bones of dragons. Beyond the prison, in a sea of molten lava, are the resting bones of a dragon of unfathomable size. This is the passage of text that accompanies the underground temple Archstone. This flame demon in question is the Flame Lurker, of course, and the prison that is referred to is the entrance chamber we see the boss burst out from when we begin the boss. However, Flame Lurker isn't just imprisoned there. He serves as a vital part of the temple's role in redirecting this lava into the burial site. Flame Lurker served as a powerful opposition to the dragon god, a powerful entity who could contend with the dragon god and thus seal it. The Flame Lurker then became part of the ritual of sealing the god, and so also became a part of Stonefang's mythology. But who exactly is the Flame Lurker? Despite the monstrous appearance, Flame Lurker still looks largely human. With a humanoid build, wide-framed and muscular, even his face appears to be that of a human with sunken eyes, swollen and scarred. The boss also fights without any weapons and armor, using only his fists, the way only real men fight. Additionally, the boss waits for us to initiate this fight, despite the clear challenge it makes upon jumping down from its supposed prison. All of this presents the Flame Lurker as a competitive, strong and yet honourable being, fighting bare-fisted amongst a litter of dragon corpses. There's only one person mentioned in Stonefang that fits this description: Big M himself. The Flame Lurker is the amalgamation of Stonefang's two greatest assets, Big M and the power of fire. If they ever hoped to match the power of the dragon god, they needed all the help they could get. Imprisoning Flame Lurker thus became a part of the ritual and keeping the dragon god contained within the temple. This deep backstory is just one of the reasons I love Flame Lurker. It's just a brilliant fight, on top of the fact that it's just a generally great boss from a mechanical standpoint too. I'd say it's one of the first bosses in the game that will be a real challenge. AoE attacks from Flame Lurker's fist slam always manage manage to catch me even if I thought I rolled at the right time. The timing in this boss is everything. As you whittle the boss's health away, he becomes more frantic, chasing you down and never yielding. I died so many times to Flame Lurker. Even though he's a simple boss with a small variety of attacks, this fight still manages to be so engaging. Upon defeating Flame Lurker and laying Big M's molten soul to rest, all that remains is the Archdemon, the Dragon God. As a result of the bones of the Dragon God being left within the molten lava, they oozed an ore called Dragonstone. The ore is a fragment of dragon bone that comes afloat in the lava for the workers to collect, implying that the bones still retain the souls from the beast's life. The ancient diggers of Stonefang had inadvertently made their shrine an ore factory, which means they would want to collect, study, and make use of this new strange ore, an ore that would become a centerpiece of their culture. As a result of this mystical Dragonstone ore, this was the angle at which the craftsman discovered the soul arts. During the Dragon God boss, we damaged the dragon by firing metal spears into its arms using 2 large ballistae. Each ballista is pulsing with blue magical aura, which means the diggers utilized the soul arts to create new, more powerful methods of keeping the Dragon God at bay, and even used this newfound magical potential to create more powerful ores and weapons to sell across the world. What was once feared by the diggers was now their source of power. However, the Monumentals banned all soul arts as a result of the first Scourge, and so the inhabitants of this dry and arid land had to give up the magical Dragonstone ore, as well as the magical weapons that once protected them. Although the threat of a mound of bones coming back to life was much less pressing than the wrath of the old one, and so the people of Stonefang agreed. They locked away the chamber of the Dragon God, sealing it away, and as the generations passed, the people forgot the location of this once holy site, most likely for the best. When King Allant woke the old one and the deep colourless fog swept across Stonefang, it brought the bones of the Dragon God to life, imbuing it with the power of the demon soul and granting it with the title of Archdemon to lead the demons on the people of Stonefang. During this second Scourge of demons, it is up to you, the Slayer of Demons, to put this Dragon God back in the ground where it should be, absorbing its soul to invigorate your own. The Dragon God boss is the first of the Archdemons that you will face throughout the course of the game. You'll learn that these aren't traditional boss fights, they're more of a cinematic boss whose purpose is to show the nearly unbeatable threat that you're up against. They're a nice change of pace compared to the normal bosses, and to be honest, I wish we got more like this in the Dark Souls series. The Dragon God is a stealth boss, if you can call it that, in which you have to hide behind pillars and stay out of the line of sight of the dragon, whilst also destroying debris that is blocking your path through the magical ballistae I mentioned earlier. It is these weapons forged using the soul arts that pin the dragon down, allowing you to approach its head to finish it off. I must admit, in concept, this boss works a lot better than it actually does in game due to the Soulsborne franchise's limited maneuverability. However, I still enjoyed this one to an extent for its cinematic grandiose feel, although to be honest I would have preferred it if it was just a standard dragon boss fight in which we get to fight a huge dragon. I think that would have been a lot more memorable. And so, with the demons of Stonefang slain and the Dragon God reduced to bone and ash once more, we leave the city of diggers behind and turn our gaze to the ivory towers of the southern kingdom of Latria. The third fractured land in Demon's Souls is one of my personal favourites from a cosmetic standpoint, the mysterious Kingdom of Latria. Your journey through Latria begins in the Prison of Hope, a name that seems to be a complete juxtaposition of what it actually is. Soul-starved prisoners wander the decrepit aisles of the prison's many walkways, and horrific human cephalopod hybrid mind flayers patrol the prison in search of trespassers. Latria focuses on themes of evil and humanity, and how the pursuit of knowledge at any cost leads to the blurring of the two. Central to the imagery of Latria is the Ivory Tower, an institution of higher learning where privileged members of Latrian society could pursue a career in the study of magical sciences. On Latria's Archstone, you can see robed men with long grey beards experimenting with lab equipment. It is apparent that the professors of Latria were heavily involved in the usage of soul arts, as within the Demon's Souls universe, magic is knowledge. As a result of this emphasis on science, Latria became a country characterised by this rational approach to magic. However, they can still be held accountable for bringing forth this scourge of demons, as they were using magic for their experiments. Experiments that are a lot more sinister below the surface than what meets the eye. Latria's ruler, the Queen, had unprecedented magical power, which was hereditary within the royal family of Latria. The Monumental also called her the Wise Queen, further implying that she was renowned for her intelligence. This could suggest that she studied in Latria's ivory tower, and therefore achieved mastery in the soul arts. As a civilization based on the rational study of souls, it only makes sense to have a master sorceress at the helm of the kingdom. Furthermore, the Nexus Archstone for Latria depicts the Queen with a halo above her head, giving her an aura of holiness and religious importance, similar to how kings were once considered to have a divine right to wear the crown. This is present in Latria. The imagery all across the world has taken heavy inspiration from the Gothic architecture of Christian cathedrals, with even the throne room having stained glass windows stretching from end to end of the room. The Queen of Latria was revered as a divine being, almost like a god, and she was loved by the people of Latria. This harkens back to the divine creator I mentioned at the beginning, the one who gave man a soul on the first day and created the old one on the second. This worship of the Queen of Latria as a god in her own right would have angered the divine creator, and thus could have sped up the process of awakening the old one. You'll come to find that Latria was a kingdom made almost entirely of families of nobility, aristocrats living extravagant lives wearing gold and silver jewellery to complement their fine clothes. However, the nobles have since been imprisoned as a result of the Scourge of Demons, and this leaves Latria with no true ruler. By exploring the various winding pathways of the Prison of Hope, you will find that you are getting closer to the once distant singing that echoes throughout the halls. If you follow the sound of the singing, you will find the first interesting character in Latria, the noblewoman. Once the wife of a wealthy lord of Latria, she remains within the Prison of Hope in fear of what lurks outside in Upper Latria, selling trinkets and jewellery in exchange for souls so that she can remain sane. Most notably, she sells the Ring of Avarice, a golden ring inlaid with a blue jewel that grants more souls when defeating enemies. This further supports the claim of nobility and riches being commonplace in Latria, especially considering you can also find this same ring in Upper Latria. If you engage in dialogue with the noblewoman, she tells us what happened to the Queen. She banished one of her most trusted advisors, an old monk, from the land, and everything was good for a time, with Latria being ruled under a matriarchy and the people loved their queen. However, this time of prosperity would not last forever, as the banished monk came back to Latria. Only this time he led an army of demons on Latria, imprisoning the noble families to experiment on their body and souls, as well as killing the queen so that he could seat himself upon the throne. The nobles that were imprisoned below eventually went mad due to being starved of their souls. One by one they left the prison, only to have their remaining souls devoured upon reaching Upper Latria. All that remains of the noble families of Latria is this one woman, left alone within the Prison of Hope, singing her lonely lament as the once great kingdom falls down around her. Although she is not alone in her imprisonment, Sage Frake, the Visionary, can also be found locked away in a cell.
Magnificent. I never expected to get out of there alive. My name is Frake. I am known as a sage. I thought my magic would give me an edge against these demons, but how wrong I was. I have been enfeebled by my long imprisonment, but I can still move my legs, and I can make it back to the Nexus.
He came to Latria in search of demon souls, so that he could use them to learn new and powerful spells. However, he underestimated the power of the demon Scourge and ended up being defeated by the demonic Golden Elder of Latria, thrown into a prison cell to rot. Much like Yuria the Witch, he offers powerful spells in exchange for demon souls. However, his spells are sorceries and not witchcraft, meaning they offer much different results. Frake's dialogue is also very insightful. He is an old master of the soul arts, and therefore knows a lot about the nature of souls, as well as the demon Scourge and what caused it. He tells us that the Scourge has activated all souls and energized all magic, which means magic is much more potent during the Scourge than it is normally. He even goes as far as to question possibly even preserving the heightened state of reality that the Scourge brings, in an effort to study magic more effectively, even at the cost of immeasurable human life. He also talks about the three human leaders that became demons: King Allant, the Golden Elder of Latria, and finally Saint Astria of the Valley of Defilement, proving that humans can evolve to a higher state of being. One interesting quote from him is,
"We were wrong to assume that only demons could do demon work."
The study of the soul arts in Latria led to many grotesque experiments, humans being mutated and disfigured and then thrown away to the depths of the city. You could argue that this in itself is as cruel as the demons that now wreak havoc across the fractured world. Sage Frake has no shortage of interesting dialogue. In fact, he mentions that the Golden Elder of Latria has power over a particular type of soul: dark souls.
I was defeated and captured by the Golden Elder beyond that dungeon. Beware of him, for he manipulates souls. He has power over dark souls, those susceptible to madness and paranoia.
This is almost hinting at the undead curse of Dark Souls 1, the curse that keeps humans alive forever, endlessly resurrecting until they go insane and hollow, losing everything that makes them human in the first place. Although, that's a story for another time. Frake also talks about the nature of the Old One, and he actually says that banishing the Old One and lulling it back to sleep would be a bad idea because cutting the Old One off from humanity would mean a loss of all of the power of the souls that the demons have collected over the course of the second Scourge. He even goes as far as trying to convince the Slayer of Demons to kill the Maiden in Black so that you can take the souls for yourself and he can study them to gain a better understanding of souls and the magic they produce. Any sane person would realise that this is a power-hungry old man speaking, a man who clearly has no second thought about the immeasurable loss of life that the second Scourge has brought. In my opinion, banishing the Old One is the best course of action, as the study of souls is what brought the Scourge about in the first place. However, Frake could be right, studying the souls could bring humanity to a higher level of being, but it's up to you to make that distinction for yourself. Frake is an immensely interesting character and has some of the best dialogue in the entire game without a doubt, on top of being a very valuable vendor for those mid to high level spells. He's definitely worth having in the Nexus. Moving on, there's one last important prisoner in the Prison of Hope, and that is the spirit of Lord Rydell. Remember Ostrava of Boletaria? This is his uncle, well, what's left of him at least. Lord Rydell was a famous hero, not too dissimilar to the heroes of Boletaria. In fact, Lord Rydell is referred to as Little Allant, insinuating that he is the younger brother of King Allant, and most likely married into a Latrian family of nobles to forge an alliance with the Southern Kingdom, and move there to be with his family. Eventually looking after the king's son, as Ostrava went to Latria to study. It is known as the Land of the Learned after all. During the Scourge of Demons, Rydell was imprisoned with many of the other nobles within the Prison of Hope. His corporeal form perished and his spirit was trapped in a cell for the rest of eternity. That is until you, the Slayer of Demons, save him from his dire situation. He asks you to find the key to help him out of his prison cell as he needs to collect an important item from his body. Upon freeing him, this item turns out to be a keepsake from his late wife. Rydell was a man who clearly loved his family, as well as Ostrava, and his imprisonment and death of his family further paints the tragic story of this family of royals and how the greed of one man ruined the lives of countless others. At least you were able to make Rydell's final moments peaceful, and he can now remember his wife as his spirit fades into the beyond. The Prison of Hope is ironically a hopeless place. The dimly lit claustrophobic walkways lining the cell blocks make every floor feel exactly the same, making it easy to get lost. It isn't until you approach the prison's church that things start to change. A huge statue of the Queen stands tall, towering over the prisoners that will be making their way across the bridge to the church for their daily sermons. This statue doubles as a defense mechanism, opening up to reveal many ballistae inside that fire volleys of arrows upon unwanted guests. Moving closer to the church, it becomes apparent that this is where we will find the next boss, the Fool's Idol. The Fool's Idol is a life-size puppet made to resemble the dead queen, a doll which has been possessed by a demon. The false queen uses a spell called Soul Ray, a spell you can learn if you give Sage Frake the doll demon soul, so maybe the demon is using the very soul of the queen to create this magic. After all, her soul would be immensely powerful as she was a master of the soul arts in life, so why would it change in death? Everything about the design of the doll, from the forearms, the book of sorceries, the wooden log to symbolise spiritual connections, and how she floats down from the roof of the church as if descending the heavens. Everything about the demon doll is intended to depict her as a divine being, so that the inhabitants of the prison consider her to be the church's goddess, although it is just an idol, a false god. The Fool's Idol boss is one of the easiest in the game without a doubt. The only attack she uses during the entire fight is Soul Ray, although she does spawn mimics of herself, so that the Demon Slayer must find the real one. This is quite straightforward, as the real one is the one that doesn't show a health bar above her head when you lock onto her. The real challenge of this boss is to determine where exactly the runes on the floor will spawn, as she creates traps for the Demon Slayer to get caught in, after which her and her mimics unleash a volley of soul rays, which can kill you if you don't have enough vitality. The Fool's Idol boss is easy. There isn't much else to say, almost too easy in fact, which surprised me as there are many easy bosses in this game, which is strange for a Soulsborne title. Moving away from the Prison of Hope now, we move deeper into Latria. Now we explore among the great spires of Upper Latria, across the narrow walkways and up winding staircases. Possibly one of the most grotesque design choices of Latria is the huge fleshy entity hanging from the ivory tower. A seemingly living creature pulsating and breathing, clinging onto the edges of the ivory tower and hoisted up by a system of ropes and two gigantic chains. The Elder of Latria, upon his return, wanted to further his research, only this time making demons out of humans, creating hybrids of human and abomination. The Mind Flayers in the Prison of Hope were once human, possibly even Latrian nobility. The huge creature in the centre of Latria is an amalgamation of all of the Golden Elder's work. It is composed of the flesh, blood and souls of humans, and therefore has all of the components to make it its own living creature. The closest the monk has come to creating a divine creature. Everything in Latria screams Lovecraftian horror. The octopus mind flayers, the human hybrid abominations, the fleshy heart in the centre of Latria. It all evokes Lovecraft's work, something that another particular fan favourite FromSoftware game would take heavy inspiration from later down the line. The Elder may have been trying to create his own eldritch god. Perhaps he even hoped to engineer a being akin to the Old One. The Old One itself does in fact draw similarities between the Old Ones featured in eldritch horror. Both the Old One and the Heart of Latria are huge beings capable of creating new demons, although the Heart only creates them from existing flesh, whereas the Old One creates new demons using the power of the souls it has absorbed. However, the ease at which we destroy this living mass of flesh, blood and soul is proof that it was far from the level of the Old One, and was an experiment in its infancy, nipped at the bud by the Slayer of Demons. Within Upper Latria you find a man hanging in a cage clad in black armour. He claims to be on your side, that he is in Latria in search of demons to slay. However, he has an ulterior motive.
Are you here to fight the demons? If so, then help me escape this place. I am on your side. I have come to face the demons.
He was commissioned by a group called the Concealers to kill every last sane person in Latria so that they can hoard the magical secrets hidden within the fog for themselves. This man is called Yurt the Silent Chief. His use of a shotl indicates his distinct membership among assassins, and he must be high ranking if his title of Silent Chief is anything to go by. He was previously operating in Boletaria, slaying many heroes. If we free him from this cell, he goes on to continue his contract, killing our friends in the Nexus and leaving us for last. So it's advised to rid the fractured world of this assassin as soon as possible, and luckily for us, Yuria the Witch warns us of his presence. He earned his reputation as the Silent Chief, however that didn't stop him from being imprisoned by the demons of Latria. Moving further into Upper Latria, this theme of grotesque creations becomes ever more apparent. After fighting through walkways of gargoyles, you take a hanging cage elevator down to what can only be described as the blood swamps. This is where the populace of Latria has gone, either turned into these unholy insectoid human hybrids, or ground down to a pulp to be added to the festering liquid that makes up the blood swamp. This area is genuinely disgusting, with the pulsating veins of the heart of Latria wrapping themselves around anything and everything. This area is beautifully repulsive in the sense that it makes me feel so repulsed, even if it's just a video game, which is a testament to the masterful design that has gone into this remake. The original Demon Souls Latria has nothing on the remake. After destabilizing each chain that hoists the heart of Latria up to the ivory tower, the heart falls and smashes into the ground below, leaking blood all over the floor and releasing more insectoid human hybrids that burrow out of the skin, making their new nest in Upper Latria. This event also means that the stairs leading to the very top of the ivory tower are no longer blocked by the veins of the heart, which means we can make our way up to the winding staircase at the very top, in which our next boss awaits us. Twin demons reside on the bridge between the ivory tower and the Queen's Tower. They are chimera-like beasts in appearance, with the body of a beast, bat wings, a serpent tail, and the head of a tormented human. These are the products of the Elder Monk's experiments to create superhumans, and he succeeded as the man-eaters became demons of their own. This fight is one of the most broken ones in the Souls series. I understand the concept of this boss. It's meant to surprise you with 2 bosses instead of 1, doubling the challenge. However, the true challenge of this boss is putting up with the terrible AI of the 2 bosses. Because they're flying enemies, they fly around the boss arena, but their AI doesn't quite seem to understand how to land, and so they fly around bumping into things and getting stuck on the various pillars that line the boss arena. When they finally land, they tend to use a leap attack that causes them to leap off the edge, forcing them to start flying, which starts the cycle all over again. This boss is not good at all. Not because I found it difficult, but because it doesn't work the way it should, and the terrible AI of the man-eaters really bogs it down for me. I think Bluepoint should have reworked this boss. I know they wanted to keep the game as close to the original as possible, but this boss is an example of how Bluepoint kept the remake true to the original to a fault. To be honest, if the bridge that you fight these two on was a little bit bigger, it would do a world of good for the boss because their moveset is actually quite varied. They can slam the ground, leap into you, punch you, use magic blast to knock you back. They even empower themselves with magical energy if the snake bites them. This can in turn be counteracted by the player by preemptively cutting the tail off. If the boss arena was bigger and obstructed with less pillars, I think this boss would have been great. However, in its current state, it just doesn't work and is, in my opinion, one of the worst bosses in the entire Soulsborne franchise. With the Fool's Idol and the Man-Eaters down, all that remains is the old monk himself, the man that brought this blight to Latria. The once ruling class of Latria now found themselves ruled, as the Queen's throne is now the seat of the Elder in Yellow. The aristocracy was now subject to his whims. It is clear that Old Monk himself withered away long ago. His body is dry and shriveled, a husk controlled by the true power, the yellow cloth. The demon cloth consumed the old man's soul and maintained the illusion that he was still alive. The demon did this because he was a deficient vessel for demonic power, and therefore unworthy of being its host. In the end, the old monk wasn't anything special. He isn't a powerful king like Allant or a saint like Astraea, and therefore his transition into demonhood was not granted. He lacked the power to be anything beyond human. When we confront the boss, the cloth leaves the soul-starved old man to die, taking his soul, leaving his body to go limp and dark. This boss is the Archdemon of Latria, and has some interesting mechanics. The boss itself is actually another player, as this fight attempts to marry PvP and bosses together. I see what they were trying to do with this fight, but to be honest, I wish it was a proper boss. With the cool Lovecraftian themes of Latria, I would have loved the Lovecraftian abomination to fight, not dissimilar to those found in Bloodborne. Instead, we get a PvP battle in which high-level players farm character tendency by invading other worlds as the Demon Cloth, and waiting in a corner with Firestorm, spamming it whenever you get close. In the end, I think you should keep PvP optional, which is something that FromSoftware did in future games, as they may have realised that this idea is better in concept than it is in execution. I personally think the Old Monk is a complete waste of an Archdemon fight. There were so many possibilities to what this boss could have been. Why make it a fight that forces you into PvP? Upon vanquishing the Old Monk and by proxy the Yellow Cloth, we have rid Latria of the Scourge of Demons and must return to the Nexus to seek out the next fractured world, the Island Shrine of Storms. Our journey through the fractured world brings us now to a small island off the coast, an island with a rich and deep history. This is in fact the first area of the fractured world we visit that wasn't a kingdom and wasn't ruled by a monarch. As the name of the Archstone suggests, it is a place overseen by the elusive Shadowmen, a tribe who lived in isolation within their fortified shrine, worshipping storms and mourning the dead. Something interesting about the Shrine of Storms is that while Boletaria and Latria still stood proud before the Scourge, Stonefang still operated at a steady pace, and even the Valley of Defilement had people who had made their home there. The original inhabitants of this place are long dead and have been since long before the Scourge of Demons. This is why all of the enemies here are reanimated corpses, skeletons and phantoms of the like, because there are no humans for the demons to possess. The weapon wielded by the heavy skeletons, the ritual blade, is described as a large ceremonial blade of an ancient tribe, insinuating that this tribe of Shadowmen is very old, ancient even, possibly even older than the cold stone walls of Boletaria or the deep tunnels of Stonefang. Upon reaching the Shrine of Storms, it is apparent that this is true. The crumbling stone walls look worn, a remnant of centuries of steady rainfall. Upon entering the gates of the inner fortress, we can make our way up the bulwark and round to a small passage which leads to our first character, Grave Robber Blige. He's a happy enough chap, even happier that we've saved him from his imprisonment. He explains to us that he came here on an expedition, but he soon realised that there was nothing here for him to pillage, as the place had been abandoned for years and most likely already picked clean.
This shrine was used in a ghastly ritual by an ancient tribe. They've long perished, and now demons have put the souls to work. At least here you're killing things that are already dead, like skeletons and shadow lurkers. Better than killing those poor, soul-starved humans, right?
He also mentions why exactly he was in prison here, and what do you know? It was orchestrated by our good friend Patches the Hyena. He tricked the grave robber and locked him away so that he could wait for him to die to steal from his corpse. It's just classic Patches. Anyway, we will bump into our devious friend again, so keep an eye out for him. Grave Robber Blige becomes a vendor for us in the Shrine of Storms, and he's a useful one at that, selling high-tier moongrasses and a variety of arrow types. Definitely one of the more useful vendors in the game, and to top it off, he moves from his cell and remains just after the next Archstone. The overall inspiration for the Shrine of Storms seems to come from the Ryukyuan religion of Okinawa, an island off the coast of Japan, in which they had shamans who were used as mediums for spiritual connection. The religion also focuses heavily on the worship of your ancestors, as well as the relationship between the living and the dead. Given the fact that the Shrine of Storms is dedicated to mourning the dead and respecting the memory of heroes, this inspiration doesn't seem too far-fetched. Not to mention that lots of Japanese-inspired items can be found here. 3 katanas, the hiltless sword, the uji katana, and the magic sword Makoto, as well as the Ronin ring. Ronin is the feudal Japanese term reserved for wandering samurai that no longer have a lord or master to serve. Additionally, the red-eyed skeletons you encounter in this area dual-wield katanas, and there is a black phantom under the shrine wielding an uji katana. Furthermore, there is a man that appears at the entrance to the Shrine of Storms, a pure white world tendency called Satsuki, the only character with a Japanese name in the entire game. He asks the Slayer of Demons to look out for the legendary sword Makoto, named after a giant from a distant land. Possibly the northern land of giants that the monumental mentioned at the beginning. The sword is a keepsake from his father, and he has travelled far from a distant eastern land to find it. He offers you demon souls in exchange for the legendary blade. A fine trade if you ask me. Upon finding the sword and returning it to Satsuki, it becomes apparent that he doesn't have any demon souls to offer, and in fact he was using you to get the sword back and intends to test its might against you. Upon defeating him, we get the magic sword Makoto back, however we learn no more about the story of Satsuki. His character and his involvement with the Shrine of Storms is a clear link between this island and its inspiration from Japanese culture. It seems that this island and its lore is inspired by the island of Okinawa and the religions that encompass that region. Moving forward deeper into the shrine, it is clear that the demons have made their home here. A demon vanguard awaits in the courtyard for anyone passing through. The reanimated skeletons line the walls, and the storm beasts patrol the skies. Fighting through the shrine's defenses is no easy task, but waiting for us at the end of it is our first boss, the Adjudicator. The first stage of the ritual of Shadowmen was to present the recently deceased to the Adjudicator. Adjudicator meaning one who judges. The Adjudicator is actually depicted on a shield, aptly named the Adjudicator Shield, in which we can see the boss and the golden spirit bird that perches itself in place of where its head would be. There is an inscribing upon the back of the shield that reads, "The hero of storms shall never act in cowardice, nor shall he devour a single bird of the sky. If the dead fail to please the Adjudicator's master, the harvest gold crow, their carcasses shall be gnawed upon until nothing but bones remain." Much like the dragon god of Stonefang, the demons of the Shrine of Storms take on the forms of the mythological beings from the pagan religion of the Shadowmen, further proving that demons can not only take the form of inanimate things like skeletons, but can actually become manifestations of the ideas and beliefs of men and their local culture. The Adjudicator boss is one of the easiest bosses in the game. It's one of those bosses that require a little bit of outside thinking to get the job done. You'll notice that the Adjudicator has a meat cleaver stuck in his side, leaking blood onto the floor. If you repeatedly hit the cleaver, it causes the boss to fall down, which means you can attack the golden crow that sits on his head. Damaging the crow is the only way to damage the boss. However, if you want, you can just shoot the bird with magical arrows without having to go down into the boss arena at all, netting you an easy kill. The next area within the Shrine of Storms is the Ritual Path, where the dead would go once the Adjudicator deemed them worthy. The Adjudicator would bestow tokens of heroism upon the deserving dead, who are then delivered by the Shadowmen to the depths of the shrine, where the bodies are cleansed by Brightwater and mourned by the storm. Within this area, we are greeted by a new enemy type, Reapers. These enemies can be found by altars, and they summon Shadowmen to attack you. It makes sense that these Reapers are what is left of the shamans that once inhabited the island, and that the shadows they raise represent the tribal men that would offer their dead to the shrine. However, they have been corrupted by the demons and now do the bidding of the old one. Additionally, the item description of the Reaper's Scythe states that these weapons were originally wielded by a sorcerer that commanded the spirits of the dead, which sounds to me like a job that would fall to the shamans. Past the Reaper's altar, we find our good old friend Patches. He tries to trick us with the promise of riches and treasure again, but this time instead of letting us go to investigate ourselves, he kicks us down the hole. Down there we meet Saint Urbane, one of the 6 saints of the Church of God. He too was fooled by the charm of Patches the hyena, and remains stuck there as a powerful black phantom blocks the way. It's quite amusing that not even a saint can resist the prospect of limitless riches, and so he too fell for Patches' trick. It's our job to kill the black phantom so that Saint Urbane can make it back to the Nexus unharmed. Once in the Nexus, he acts as a new vendor for magic, although he teaches you the third school of magic, miracles. Unlike spells and witchcraft, miracles usually have a non-offensive effect, such as regeneration or the ability to warp back to the Nexus, although there are some very powerful miracles. Saint Urbane is a disciple of God, and he has some very interesting dialogue that sheds some light on the nature of miracles, as well as the ignorance of the Church of God.
Heavenly miracles occur in Boletaria through the talismans. God has granted this accursed land with a special power. It is God's way of telling us we must stand up to the demons. After the dark arts spread across the land, holy miracles were witnessed once again. The will of God is clear. We must defeat the demons, annul the curse of Boletaria, and purge the evil magicians who manipulate those accursed souls.
He believes that miracles are a pure source of magic, and that God has granted humans the ability to cast miracles as a result of the Scourge of Demons. We know this to be not true. Sage Frake has already stated that the Scourge has empowered souls, meaning magic is more potent and perhaps miracles are just a byproduct of this. Saint Urbain is not aware that the magic he uses in the form of miracles are exactly the same as the sorceries used by Frake and the witchcraft used by Uria. But the Church of God has muddied the waters of history since the first Scourge, and deemed their use of magic righteous, while condemning those that study the other schools. This further reflects the corruption of Boletaria. The Church was essentially monopolising the use of magic through the guise of religious practice, and it worked for the most part. All other forms of magic were outlawed in Boletaria, whereas the Church was allowed to continue their research into the soul arts, further accelerating the awakening of the Old One. He also makes mention of the 6th Saint Astraea, and her exploits in the Valley of Defilement with the Knight Garl Vinland. There have been rumours that she herself is a demon. However, Urbain is quick to deny these claims as his faith in the Church is insurmountable.
Ah, Astraea of the Valley of Defilement? I'm not sure, but Saint Astraea of the West was accompanied by the knight Garl Vinland. She would never turn to evil with that upstanding knight to guide her. Surely it is mere slander. Sadly, the weak are prone to such backstabbing.
Although the story of Astraea and her trusted knight Garl Vinland will be discussed later when we venture into the Valley of Defilement. Another interesting piece of dialogue from Saint Urbain is when he talks about the Old One itself. After defeating all of the archdemons, he shows pity towards the Old One, referring to it as a poor hungry child, which may be true. Humans view the Old One as a terrible demon as it threatens their existence. However, maybe humanity just isn't ready to comprehend the existence of the Old One, and that its true nature is just the natural course of the universe. However, humans will always try to shift the tides of fate. We will talk more about Saint Urbain later, as his story is involved with the Saint Astraea, but we'll get to that in due time. After saving Saint Urbain and killing the katana-wielding Black Phantom, we make our way out of the cave and return to Patches, who is very surprised at our survival.
You! Hey look, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I mean, a man's got to make a living, right? Here, look. I can make up for it. There aren't many humans like us. We need to stick together.
You could kill him here, Lord knows he deserves it for trying to kill us twice, but he's too valuable of a vendor to be killed. Having a vendor within the Nexus who sells full moon grass, late moon grass and fresh spice is just too good. Plus, as much as he does try to kill us, we all love Patches deep down, and it's nice to have him around. And unfortunately to say, this is the last time we see Patches until the next game. He will remain in the Nexus, but he has no more schemes for us this time around. The first area of this ritual path can actually be used as a farming spot for a very large amount of souls for minimal effort. Just equip the Ring of Avarice, a bow, and repeatedly shoot the Reaper behind the altar, as killing him also kills all of the Shadowmen, causing the enemies to drop thousands of souls in seconds. I spent a lot of time here at this spot grinding souls, so I felt as if I had to mention it. Moving through the ritual path, we face many more of the same enemies: skeletons, sky beasts, reapers, and more Shadowmen. That is until we reach this underground cave filled with bright water. You may recognize the name Brightwater as one of the many consumables you can find throughout your exploits in the Fractured World. The item description for Brightwater reads as follows: rare glowing water that has been refined for its magical properties. Recovers some of the user's MP over time. It is said that the origins of the mixture are found deep beneath the remains of an ancient shrine. This Brightwater has even caused the slugs in this cave to become magical beings. When killed, they drop the sticky white slime, which is said to be the waste product of a slug that bathed in magic-endowed luminescent water. This natural source of Brightwater became a very important part of the Ritual of Storms, in which the bodies of particularly notable heroes were cleansed with this Brightwater, imbuing their bodies with magic. One such body can be found in the next boss arena. Bathing in Brightwater on the altar, you can find a legendary hero soul resting on top of the corpse, signifying that this was the body of a once legendary hero, now forgotten, left to decay. The next boss is the demonic image of one such hero, and gives us probably the most accurate representation of what these tribal people looked like before their demise, sporting various piercings, wearing simple leather armor adorned with tribal decoration, and has the skin around his mouth peeled back to reveal his teeth. The old hero could in fact be one of the heroes we mentioned at the beginning, similar to the legendary Big M from Stonefang, Old King Doran from Boletaria, or the Latrian hero mentioned in the item description for the rune sword and shield. It seems each of these civilizations had their own unique heroes that formed the basis of their religions. This is especially evident when reading the item description of the old hero's crescent blade, as it refers to him as the hero of storms, insinuating that he has particular significance in their beliefs. The old hero boss itself is a joy to play. Not only is it challenging, but it's a really interesting concept for a boss. The old hero is blind, and so he can only determine your location by the noise you make. Therefore, you have to carefully edge around the boss arena, attacking him from behind and then running away so that he doesn't know your location. Granted, you can just use the thief ring during this fight, which makes it stupidly easy, but I would really recommend playing it without the thief ring first to get the true experience of the boss. It really is one of the better bosses in Demon's Souls, and I for one really look forward to it on every playthrough. It would have been cool to see more bosses like this in Dark Souls. For example, Osiros, the Consumed King in Dark Souls 3 is blind, so it would have been really cool to see this mechanic come back for this fight. Overall, the old hero is a really solid boss from a design, lore, and mechanical standpoint. Finally, our journey through the shrine leads us to the Monolith Forest, a place of religious importance for the people of the Shrine of Storms, as this is where the storms are worshipped, and this is where we find the Archdemon, the Storm King. The Storm King is a flying beast resembling a gigantic stingray, and is a demonic manifestation of the thoughts and feelings of the Shadowmen who worshipped it centuries ago. This piece of text from the Storm King Archstone further supports the theory that the demons here at the Shrine of Storms are perhaps creatures that didn't actually exist, but instead manifested from the beliefs of the pagan religion that worshipped storms. During the boss fight, we find the Storm Ruler, a legendary blade named for one who controls storms. The item description for the Storm Ruler reads as follows: "It is said that the ancestral Shadowmen rent the very storm clouds from the sky with its might. Abandoned for an age, the sword is badly deteriorated, but what remains of this once mighty weapon is still enough to send foes flying. If wielded in the Forest of Monoliths, resting place of ancestral spirits, its power to rend the sky might just be reawoken." The Storm Ruler was created by the Shadowmen using the power of the Soul Arts. It is a sword that harnesses the power of storms, and therefore makes it the perfect weapon for taking down the Storm King. The Storm King boss is actually another one of my favourites, not because it's tough, because it's in fact really easy, but it's just such an impressive boss for the spectacle of it all. The huge demon comes flying out of the clouds, darkening the sky, and you are on this small defenseless island with nothing else but the legendary Storm Ruler. The whole fight is just so cinematic, with the rain billowing in the wind and the Storm King releasing ungodly shrieks into the air. There's also really nice attention to detail in this boss. The air slices through the rain, causing it to be blown out of the way by the sword. Additionally, when the Storm King is overhead, it actually blocks out the rain because of the sheer size of it, which I found to be a really nice bit of detail. This definitely would be overlooked by the developers, so Bluepoint really went above and beyond in that aspect of the boss. On the whole, the Storm King is an easy fight, but it remains memorable for its grandeur. With the demons in the Shrine of Storms defeated and the mysteries uncovered, that leaves us only one more area of the fractured world to rid of the demon Scourge: the putrid Valley of Defilement. The final place within the fractured world that we explore is the Valley of Defilement, a humid valley that attracts all manner of grime and plague. The Valley of Defilement rests at the base of a very large chasm, where many streams run and fall into the bottom of the chasm, creating a large pool of water from water sources all over the world, with all of these streams collecting all manner of dirt, grime and sludge and depositing it off at the base of the huge valley. All that is unclean ends up in the giant swamp at the base of the Valley of Defilement. The swamp is a cesspool of putrid pillage, vermin and plague, although this hasn't stopped many from making their home there and settling within this humid valley before the Scourge of Demons. In the first area we see small shacks made of repurposed wood, most likely driftwood that has found itself floating among the swamp. The rickety dwellings of this valley's people are rotting and falling apart, causing them to be misshapen and clinging onto the edges of the rock formations that make up the walls of the cave. There is also a village within the Swamp of Sorrow, stretching up from the base of the swamp all the way up to the ceiling of the chasm. It is evident that the people who live here make do with what they can. Although the Valley of Defilement may not have always been like this, it almost seems like it would be a naturally forming boon for those wishing to settle. Running water, stone cave walls, shielding the inhabitants from invaders, and a huge space within the chasm upon which to settle. Although, as the kingdoms of Boletaria, Stonefang and Latria arose, so too would the waste that each of these cities produced, which could mean that this waste could be swept away by the streams that eventually lead to the valley, causing the muck and grime to build up over the years. To top it off, one of the water sources leading into the Swamp of Sorrow is filled to the brim with what looks to be years' worth of rotting corpses, which would cause the water within the swamp to be contaminated with rot and disease. There are also all manner of disgusting creatures that make their home here, namely the bloated ticks that gorge on the blood of the dead or dying, or the mosquitoes that swarm you in groups. It's safe to say that it's surprising that the Valley of Defilement even supports life, given these inhumane conditions. However, the people of this place persevere. But what exactly keeps them going? With the Chieftain mentioned and depicted on the Valley of Defilement's Archstone nowhere to be found, who keeps this valley in order? The only person who can. A saint. The 6th Saint Astraea, accompanied by her knight Gal Vinland. To better understand Astraea, as well as the responsibility that falls upon saints within the Demon Souls universe, let's go back and talk about the origins of the Church of God. The Church of God began in the land of Merd. The Merden scale armor set makes mention that the first temple was built in Merd, a land that fell long ago, most likely as the result of the first Scourge of Demons before the Monumentals created the Nexus and banned the Soul Arts. The Merden armor was worn proudly by the Temple Knights, who were deemed as honourable servants of God, warriors who would use a mixture of miracles and spears for crowd control when the need arose. We know not exactly when the Temple of God began, but we do know that it was long enough ago that the land of Merd was built up and fell. After the banning of the Soul Arts, this religion spread all across the land, even being adopted by nobles, and therefore being recognised as a sign of nobility. This led to miracles being regarded as heavenly or good, and sorceries being evil or bad.
A miracle is a heavenly act, but spells are the acts of demons, the work of soul arts. They have similar effects, and yet one is clearly evil, and the other is clearly good.
As we've mentioned before, the Church is ignorant in their belief that miracles are good and sorceries are bad. All forms of magic derive from the power of the Old One, and therefore both are able to wake the Old One from its slumber. Sage Frake actually makes mention of something quite ominous.
Prayer is for the foolish, quaint, and soon to be dead. And heaven forbid the day you find out what their so-called God really is.
So, what is the god that is worshipped by the Church? Well, if we look at the item description of the Talisman of Beasts, it reads, an old wooden amulet featuring a symbolic depiction of the Old One. What was considered a depiction of God was in fact an image of the Old One, portrayed as a force of feral chaos. This is what was once believed to be a depiction of God. The wooden talisman clearly depicts the head of the Old One, with the layered branches forming a cone. Could this mean that the Church's God is in fact the Old One itself? Furthermore, even the Talisman of God used by current defenders of the faith is meant to be a symbolic depiction of God, and yet it seems to have layers of branches engraved into the talisman, akin to the many branches of the Old One's thick wooden skin. Furthermore, the Talisman of Beasts can be used to cast both miracles and sorceries, proving that all magic does in fact come from the same place. The souls of demons and the magical communion of the presence of the Old One. The Church of God has forced this distinction between good magic and bad magic. Even Yuria the Witch believes that her magic is tainted, even though all magic comes from the souls of demons.
I was branded a witch at a very young age, and since then, I have been persecuted as a threat to human society. Although I never had ill intentions, this black craft of mine is intrinsically evil. If there is a God, he gave us souls to do good, not to practice witchcraft. My accusers detested my dark arts for good reason, for the path I have taken is tainted.
Yuria the Witch discovered spells when she was very young. However, she wasn't born into nobility, and was therefore branded a witch for the rest of her days, hated by those around her. On the other hand, the Ring of Sincere Prayers item description reads as follows: one of the few remaining relics of God, discovered by Astraea, the 6th saint, at a tender young age. Both Yuria and Astraea discovered magic when they were young, however one was born into nobility and one was not, and so Astraea was encouraged to study the soul arts and named a saint, whereas Yuria was shunned. Although this isn't the only example of people of religious importance within the world of Demon Souls referring to magical items as holy instead of blasphemous. The weapons of Garl Vinland and his sister Selen Vinland are both magical weapons. Bramd, Garl's weapon, increases resistance to plague and poison, insinuating a magical resistance that the weapon offers. And Blind, Selen Vinland's weapon, is a sword with a perfectly transparent blade. The blade is illusory and can therefore pass through any shield's defenses, obviously another magical weapon. And yet both of these weapons are recognised as Vinland family treasures, and not blasphemous works of accursed magic, like many of the members of the church refer to magic as. Additionally, the spear Istarel, wielded by the knight Rizaya, also offers a resistance to plague and poison, making this spear yet another magical imbued weapon used by the church. However, the most obvious of all of these relics of God is the Great Sword of Moonlight. Within the Souls universe, Moonlight is directly linked with magic. If we look at the item description for Moonlight Stone, it mentions that the ore imbues weapons with a powerful magic effect, meaning that the Moonlight Greatsword is probably the most pure form of magic within the Demon Souls universe, with a blade made entirely of moonlight. This blade is strongly associated with the Moonlight Knight Vito, and is also considered one of the few remaining relics of God, despite its clear magical nature. Do you see the pattern here? Nobility and members of the church were allowed to use magical weapons and items, and yet those who were born into poverty were branded heretics and witches. This very much reveals the nature of the church and Demon Souls, as they are very self-serving and vindictive, picking and choosing who can and can't use magic as if they own the power. The elite and ruling class were the ones who were able to benefit from magic, and they were praised for it, whereas the working class and homeless were shunned for their use of magic, if they dared study it. With this background of the Church of God, I think it's time we delve into the Valley of Defilement, otherwise this video will be much longer than it already is. After fighting through the depraved men living within the first settlement of the valley, we come across the first boss of the area, the Leechmonger. The Leechmonger is a predatory mass of blood-sucking leeches, brought together in a writhing, sentient blob by the power of a demon soul. The Leechmonger hides underneath the shallow waters of the depraved chasm, submerged in a pool of scum. The Leechmonger boss is pretty unremarkable, to be honest. It's meant to be a symbolic representation of the valley itself, representing the creatures that live there. As a boss though, it's just incredibly easy, especially if you're using a magic build. The Leechmonger throws these balls of leeches at you that when hit you do a very small amount of damage, but the damage lingers because the leeches cling onto you. At this point in the game, you should be quite powerful. All you need to do if you're a magic build is stand out of reach of the Leechmonger's arms and shoot fire spells at it, dodging every now and then to avoid the balls of leeches being hurled at you. If you're a melee build, you can just go down right next to the boss and hack away at it. It will be a good idea to imbue your sword with some pine resin to take advantage of the boss's weakness to fire. This is a really easy fight, and on top of that, there isn't even really any cool lore that goes with it, so the Leechmonger is very forgettable, in my opinion. Moving into the Swamp of Sorrow, this is where we get a good look at the valley in all its glory, with the swamp stretching into the darkness. In this area, the swamp does poison damage to you, which can be deadly if you aren't looking at your health bar. The Valley of Defilement is definitely a brutally unforgiving place, and that only gets worse as you approach the village of the Defiled, a rickety village made of salvaged wood, home to countless depraved men that lunge out at you from the shadows. I have to add, this area in New Game Plus is a complete and utter nightmare, with enemies breaking your guard and one-shotting you left, right and centre. Past this small village of the damned is our next boss, the Dirty Colossus. The Dirty Colossus is a deformed creature that arose from the compounded filth that accumulated within the valley. It has a golem-like figure with a spiky red carapace that is covered in brown slime and pieces of wood from the valley. Its sensitive abdomen is protected by this layer of wood, and a cloud of flies swarms around its head. The Dirty Colossus, much like the Leechmonger, is a very mundane boss with very little lore. In fact, I'd call this boss a reskin of the Leechmonger, because its only attacks are being able to shoot projectiles at you that do lasting damage, and it hits you at a close close range. It's a real shame that these last two bosses have been underwhelming, and it took me by surprise when I first played it, as it's very rare these days for FromSoftware games to have bad bosses, although I'll let it slide because this was the Souls series in its infancy, and it seems that the developers at FromSoftware were just finding their footing into this new territory. It's interesting to see the humble beginnings of such a great franchise. After defeating the Dirty Colossus, that leaves us with one more demon to defeat, the Archdemon. Although this Archdemon isn't a terrifying dragon, an evil corrupted monk, or even a huge sky beast. No, this Archdemon is none other than Maiden Astraea, a saint of the Church of God, accompanied by her trusted knight, Garl Vinland. Astraea and Garl grew up together as childhood friends. Most likely their noble parents were friends, and therefore they became friends as a result. Astraea grew up to be the 6th saint of the Church of God, studying miracles and the soul arts, whereas Garl Vinland became a noble knight, inheriting his family's armour and the giant slaying hammer Brampt. Eventually they left Boletaria in search of those that they could help, naive in their knowledge of the world. Upon reaching the Valley of Defilement, it became apparent that this place was a far cry from the comforting nobility that they knew from their youth. Instead, they witnessed the plague, rot, disease, and death that was commonplace in the Valley of Defilement. Deeply disturbed by what they had found, Maiden Astraea and her only true friend, Garl Vinland, abandoned the church because how could the benevolent god they held in such high esteem allow these people to live in such plight, such conditions they never even knew existed in their sheltered lives of nobility? Astraea was once the 6th saint, but now she lives beside those awaiting death in the Valley of Defilement. To ease the pain of the valley's dwellers, Astraea chose to surrender to a demon's soul over the cruel god she once worshipped. Beyond the swamp, filled with poisonous jellyfish and giant slugs, is a cavern that absorbs all that is unclean. A shrine of rotted trees erected in honour of a demon. Visitors offer their souls to be freed from their notions of suffering. The people of the Valley of Defilement await their death in this forsaken place, attacking those who wander in, hoping to offer their souls to the one woman who showed them compassion. The villagers of the Valley of Defilement raise the shrine to the Maiden Astraea and worship her as if she was a god. Because she is a demon and takes souls for herself and the Old One, her subjects attack everyone who would come into the valley so that they can offer souls to free them from their suffering. But what is the solution to their suffering? Well, Astraea soon realised that there is nothing she can do for the people of the Valley of Defilement, as the plague and rot had consumed everything within it. However, the last thing she can do for these people is to remove their suffering entirely. The inhabitants of the Valley of Defilement offer their souls to Astraea, in turn making them soul-starved, which means that they no longer have the humanity to comprehend their suffering, a last act of mercy for the people of this forsaken place. Now, this is up to your personal interpretation. Is Astraea actually helping these people, or has she only contributed to the terrible situation that these people find themselves in? After all, she is now a demon, and she takes the souls of the living in servitude to the Old One, but her goals are to simply stop the suffering of those that lived here, and taking their souls means they no longer feel the pain and torment. Furthermore, many honourable knights from Boletaria have ventured into the Valley of Defilement, never to return, such as a variety of temple knights, warrior priests, and even some of the most powerful knights in Boletaria, such as Knight Rizaya of Istarel, or the great Moonlight Knight Vito. None returned, all fell victim to the valley, or to Astraea herself, as she sits upon a mountain of corpses all clad in the armour of knights.
Vito, the Moonlight Knight, Rizaya of Istarel, and Selan Vinland. Many honourable knights have ventured into Boletaria in search of the Valley of Defilement. The vicious rumours about Astraea offend our most basic sense of respect for God's name. However, none of these great knights has made it back. Could it be that the wretched valley is so infested with grime that even our Lord's voice does not resonate there? Or perhaps it is the fate of those left behind by God.
Rizaya's spear, Istarel, can be found in the valley in pure white world tendency, insinuating that she fell victim to the chasm. Additionally, the great Sword of Moonlight can be found in the Swamp of Sorrow within the Nest of Slugs, meaning that even Vito, with his legendary sword, died in search of the Maiden Astraea. Only Selan Vinland remains, in search of her brother Garl, hoping to dispel the rumours about her brother and Astraea to finally bring them home.
I am Selan of the West. I seek my brother Garl Vinland, the knight who accompanied Saint Astraea on her travels. I believe they settled here. If you happen to see my younger brother, please tell me. I must share with him the last words of our father.
If you defeat Garl Vinland's Black Phantom, he drops the Vinland crest, and you can bring this to Sellen, in which she realises the truth, that her brother and Astraea did in fact stray from the path of the church.
This crest, that is a Vinland heirloom meant for my younger brother. So, my brother and Astraea have both strayed from the path of God. The poor souls. Perhaps their hearts were too pure. Mbasa.
We never learn the exact words of their dying father, but we are given a small hint as to what his final wish was. Sellen gifts you the Ring of Devout Prayer, a symbol of high status in the church. It is bestowed upon those who are engaged in deep and constant prayer, devoted to selfless and eternal service to their maker. The only other character that has this ring in the entire game is Saint Urbain, so it seems as if the last wish of their father was to ascend Garl to a higher position within the church. In the end, this wish was never granted. Astraea and Vinland die side by side, fighting for something they both believe in. A sad end for these lifelong friends.
How dare you persist in intruding upon our haven? You abandoned us long ago. What right do you have? We shall defend our hearth and home to the death. Dearest Astraea, I have failed you.
After defeating Garl Vinland, Astraea is forced to give up her soul to the Slayer of Demons, so that we may lull the old one back to sleep.
Leave us, Slayer of Demons. This is a sanctuary for the lost and wretched. There is nothing here for you to pillage or plunder. Please, leave quietly. You killed him, didn't you? Very well. I can no longer resist you. Do as you like. Take your precious demon soul. Dear Lord, you are too cruel.
Although you do question your actions during this section, because even though Astraea is a demon, she is compassionate and only accepted demonhood so she could help the inhabitants of the valley. This is definitely one of the most memorable moments in the entire game, and really blurs the lines between good and evil, which is a theme that spans all throughout this game. Upon overcoming the challenges of the Valley of Defilement, defeating the demons and laying Saint Astraea to rest, it is time to return to where it all started. To return to Boletaria to face King Allant. Upon finally returning to Boletaria, the journey that we as the Slayer of Demons have been through is hard to ignore. When we were last here, we paled in comparison to the power we now have, after absorbing the souls of the archdemons of Stonefang, Latria, the Shrine of Storms, and finally the Valley of Defilement. Waiting for us, as our final challenge before facing the king himself, is a blue dragon. After sprinting past the roaring flames of the dragon's breath, the dragon perches itself above the archway leading into the king's palace. Suddenly, from the sidelines comes our good friend Bjor of the Twin Fangs, the last legendary knight of Boletaria.
Leave the flying lizard to me! May light shine upon our lord and our proud Boletaria! Boletaria!
He lays down his life for us, distracting the dragon so that we can press on into the king's chamber. Finally, waiting for us within the dilapidated throne room is the demonic image of King Allant, a demon created by the real King Allant to represent himself at the height of his power. An image of a once great king, now tainted by the power of demon souls. He draws the legendary Boletarian sword Soulbrant and poises himself to fight. It has all been leading to this. The old King Allant fight is brilliant in my opinion. It really feels like this boss is an amalgamation of all the skills you've learned throughout the game. He uses a flurry of attacks to overwhelm you, he uses wind magic capable of dealing massive damage, and he glides across the boss arena slashing his sword across you. On top of that, the music that plays during this boss is absolutely brilliant, and perfectly fits the field of this final fight, atop the highest tower in Boletaria. After defeating the demonic image of King Allant and absorbing his soul, bolstering your own power further, this is the moment that the Slayer of Demons ascends into demonhood themselves. After all of the archdemons have now been slain, and their souls absorbed. and we are at the height of our power. Upon returning to the Nexus, the Maiden in Black takes our hand and we plummet down to the earth below, in which we can see what the rest of the world truly looks like. A barren landscape covered in fog, with the remnants of old buildings from lost civilizations stretching as far as the eye can see. But more importantly, we come face to face with the Old One itself, towering above us in the fog. The Old One lifts its colossal head and rests it on the ground, inviting us as a new demon to venture inside. Upon entering, we hear the voice of the true King Allant for the first time as he welcomes us into the lair of the Old One.
You have been chosen by the Old One. Shalt thou seek everlasting demon souls, or obey that naive monumental? Whatever your choice, you are our first visitor. May you be welcome here.
This is where we reach the final fog gate. After walking through, we see the true form of King Allant, a bloated, disgusting pile of flesh covered in pustules, still clinging to his sword Soulbrand. The power that the Old One granted King Allant with mutated him into a disgusting pile of flesh, and so he was forced to flee Boletaria, taking refuge within the Old One and placing a demon in his image on the throne of his beloved kingdom. It's up to us to put Allant out of his misery, as he clearly no longer wants to exist. Hence why he awoke the Old One in the first place, with the intention of letting it devour the souls of the remaining populace of the fractured world. And with dealing the final blow to Allant, we have conquered all of our enemies. There's nobody left to fight. All that remains now is to let the Maiden in Black lull the Old One back to slumber. Our work is done. We can return home. Our soul is no longer bound to the Nexus, and so we are free. You do have a choice here. You can either walk away and allow the Old One to be lulled back to sleep, thus ending the Scourge of Demons, or you can kill the Maiden in Black, taking the soul of the Old One for yourself, meaning you gain immeasurable power and can rule over what remains of the fractured world. I believe the true ending is to allow the Maiden in Black to complete her work and to seal the Old One away once more, you yourself becoming a monumental, so that you can uphold the peace across the world, making sure the same mistake isn't made again. Although I do recommend going back on New Game Plus if you want to, so that you can experience the other ending too. They're both quite good in their own right. And so, with that, the Slayer of Demons walks away, with a new world to tend to, and no more demons left to face. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, if you've made it that far, if you've decided to watch the entire thing. I've worked incredibly hard on this video. I know a lot of you probably weren't expecting a 1 hour, nearly 2 hour review of Demon's Souls, but I really love this game, and I think the FromSoftware games are absolutely amazing in terms of the way they tell their story and the worlds they build up, and I wanted to convey that to you guys exactly the way it was conveyed to me through the game. So I basically went back through on New Game Plus, played it all again, got a load of cinematic shots, and it's turned out really well. The script is around 20,000 words long, so it took me a long time to write that, but I just want to thank you guys if you got this far in the video and if you watched the entire thing. It really means a lot to me. I thought I'd mention that this video was heavily inspired by VIII's Souls content. He's a Dark Souls, Soulsborne YouTuber who does a lot of videos going over the story and nuances of Dark Souls, and they're fantastic videos. In fact, his videos are what inspired me to make this review the way I did in the first place. I could have very easily just recorded my gameplay, finished the game, and done a normal critique of it, but I didn't want to, because I wanted to tell the story of this game. Because it's not necessarily a game that tells you the story as you play it. It's something you have to work out for yourself. And so I think a lot of people miss the beauty of these games in that regard. So I wanted to make a video going over the story and the world and the environment and the characters in a way that people can understand it in a formatted way. You can expect way more videos of this length and this quality coming on the channel soon, as this is really a type of content that I really want to make more of. It's just so fun going through an entire game, telling the entire story and critiquing it along the way, instead of making just a half-assed review and throwing it out there with little to no substance to it whatsoever. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I can't tell you the immeasurable amount of hours it's taken me to make this, but I'm so proud of it, and it's definitely my best work yet. Stay tuned on the channel for more content and streams, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.